Cambodia is a country in Southeast Asia bordering Thailand and Vietnam. Cambodia has many jungles, which were extremely suitable for the Khmer Rouge to develop and hatch their plans to overthrow Cambodia.
The Khmer Rouge were a radical communist political faction. Their formation was a response to foreign involvement in Cambodia and Vietnam, mainly by France. The party's rise to power began in 1970, where they began to gain enough supporters to take many parts of Cambodia by force. Eventually, the Khmer Rouge had enough land and followers to overthrow the current anti-communist monarch Lon Nol. Once the Khmer Rouge took control of Cambodia, they immediately turned the nation communist.
In the late 1970s, the murder of over 2 million people in Cambodia went unnoticed. Cambodia, under the communist Khmer Rouge regime, sought to remove foreigners and Western-aligned citizens so they could create a state-run agrarian communism, reminiscent of their cultural golden age during their medieval period. To accomplish this, the nation's population was moved from their cities into the jungle, where farming compounds were set up. They were forced to be self-sufficient, and many died of starvation and preventable disease that could have been remedied easily by people off the farms. The regime forced laborers to work with inhumane intensity, and many died of exhaustion or injury from work. Any who refused or couldn't make the journey to the farms were killed by the Khmer military. The regime wasn't satisfied with its citizens simply working. Many were viewed by the state as a threat to their reign, on account of religion, ethnicity, political mindset, or even education. Groups like the Chinese and Muslims received particularly high levels of hatred. After being designated by the government, undesirables were sent to extermination camps. There, prisoners were tortured, starved, and were then sent to killing fields. Soldiers and citizens alike were forced to kill state enemies with metal pipes, farming hoes, and other unconventional instruments. Some were even asked to dig their own graves and couldn't, being so weak from malnutrition. In some of these killing fields, babies were even hit against trees to kill them. This state-run extermination process happened from 1975 to 1978, and some estimates suggest that 2 million or more died from starvation or state-regulated execution, which at the time was about 25% of Cambodia's population. The reign of terror ended when Communist Vietnam invaded under Ho Chi Minh, angered by the many skirmishes they were having with the Khmer Rouge along their border. Of course, their successful invasion stopped the killings as well.
Our CNN news team went to Cambodia, where we had a special interview with the one and only Pol Pot.
What was your motivation for killing over 2 million people?
Well, for starters, I simply wished to return Cambodia to the glory of its medieval days. I only ordered the killing of people if it was necessary. My belief is that these people just didn't belong in my society. Globalization has allowed for far too many minority races into Cambodia, and they just poisoned the ethnic purity that once existed in my beloved country.
While some of Pol Pot's claims are correct, much of what he claims in the interview does not check out with other accounts. Many survivors and victims claim that oftentimes the Khmer Rouge killed for sport, rather than for a specific reason. We shared our information with Pol Pot and questioned him on it. Here's the segment.
Were you aware of the methods that were being used to exterminate minority populations in your country?
Please understand, my attention was only spent on the important individuals and events. I was simply the chosen face of the revolution. I had no control over individual actions or of the actions taken by the officers of the Khmer Rouge. The revolution consisted of many people and many different groups with different intentions. My intentions were simply to return Cambodia to its former prowess. Unfortunately, my face and image has been associated with these cruel, heinous, and unjust peoples rather than with a noble revolution.
It is true that there were several divisions of the Khmer Rouge that were not controlled directly by Pol Pot. However, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge did create the initial list of all unwanted civilians and were still responsible for most of the massacres that occurred in Cambodia. With that being said, we will take you to the final segment of the interview with Pol Pot to attempt to get a more personal look at the man responsible for such horrible events.
If you had the opportunity to go back and change anything, would you?
Of course. What happened was uncalled for and not what I desired. It's unfair that because of others' actions, I am seen as a monster. If I could go back, I would take a more active role in the revolution and prevent all the unnecessary death and despair that occurred.
After the interview with Pol Pot, we flew to France, where we met with France's UN Secretary Edmond Montaigne. Edmond was one of many who did not think that genocide in Cambodia was occurring. We had the pleasure of sitting down with Edmond at his house in France. Edmund, what was your initial reaction to the reports of genocide in Cambodia?
Well, at a personal level, myself as well as some fellow countrymen were horrified and shocked by the reports. Unfortunately, French officials could not determine whether or not it was a genocide at the time. The evidence was unclear and inconsistent, and it appeared to us that it was simply a violent revolution, rather than a government-orchestrated extermination of minorities.
As I understand it, France at the time had a strong military and economy. In addition, your government attended the UN Genocide Prevention Conference, which was specifically created to prevent atrocities such as this one. It has also been made clear that evidence strongly supported the idea that there was, in fact, a genocide in Cambodia. Why is it that France was unable to intervene?
Well, as a communist nation, it would have been unwise to challenge what was happening in Cambodia, given that the revolution occurred during the Cold War. We felt any sort of alignment in this issue would invoke the power of the USSR and Communist China. In fact, the event that occurred earlier in Vietnam proved that despite our military and economic superiority, we were not able to maintain significant impact in the region either.
While much of what Edmund has stated is true, it is important to note that there was, in fact, quite sufficient evidence of a genocide in Cambodia. Francois Panchard's novel Year Zero is an excellent example. The French missionary was a victim of the ethnic cleansing and just barely escaped being killed by the Khmer Rouge. In his book, he reveals many of the horrors of the Cambodian genocide, including the ways they killed people and how people were treated. His book is one of the few formal primary sources from the Cambodian genocide. Surprisingly, after the release of his book, the international community turned a blind eye to the issue and still refused to classify the ethnic cleansing in Cambodia as a genocide. He was one of the few who screamed bloody murder.
After speaking to Edmund in Paris, we flew over to California, where we met with the survivor of the Cambodian genocide. Describe your personal experiences in Cambodia.
Well, I was a private journalist. When news broke out about the revolution in Cambodia, I felt it was my duty to get a first-hand look. I understood that what I was doing was very dangerous, and I knew the risk. Unfortunately, my worst fears became real when a member of the Khmer Rouge caught me photographing executions. They captured me, imprisoned me, and tortured me. They starved us and put us in cramped cells. What I saw when I was there are things not meant to be seen by any human. I saw thousands of babies die each day. It was horrific.
Describe how the killings were carried out.
It cannot be put into words what was done, but I will try my best. Since the Khmer Rouge did not want to waste any money on bullets, victims were usually bludgeoned to death or maimed with crude farming tools. People would often be forced to dig their own graves. The Khmer Rouge killed for fun. I cannot understand how anyone could kill so many people.
The Cambodian genocide is considered as one of the worst systematic ethnic cleansings since World War II. After the genocide, Cambodia never really fully recovered. Over a full quarter of the population was killed, and Cambodia went into severe economic recession. In addition, an unstable and corrupt government replaced the Khmer Rouge. The perpetrators of the genocide did not go unpunished, however. Later on, many of the high-ranking officials of the Khmer Rouge received jail time for crimes against humanity. Pol Pot was convicted, but committed suicide to avoid the trial. Despite many of the high-ranking officers being convicted, many of the low-level perpetrators are still alive and well, and currently residing in the Cambodian jungle. The Khmer Rouge still commit violent acts against Cambodians in an attempt to complete their unfinished work.